Hey guys, Brian from Boas here. I've been getting a lot of questions from you guys, so today I thought I'd take a few minutes and answer some of the most relevant questions. So keep the questions coming so we can continue to do these types of videos. So first off, I wanted to thank everybody for the overwhelmingly positive response to my merch launch that I did last week. And I really appreciate all of the very kind feedback and the very great ideas that you guys have had, suggestions for future merch items. And I am planning on designing some new merch and releasing some hopefully in the next month or so. But just a few ideas that I have are to do some additional t-shirts featuring other types of locality boas, maybe some shirts with multiple pictures, some shirts with one specific type of boa on it. I also have ideas for long sleeve shirts as well. And then probably several types of hats, including beanie hats and bucket hats. And then also accessories like mouse pads and drinking cups, things like that. So stay tuned. These will hopefully come out over the next month or so. And I've been getting a lot of questions about the merch, and I thought I'd start this question and answer session by answering a few of them. And so someone asked whether I could just put my boas up on the merch site and everything would be right there and they could buy the boas using Apple Pay, and that would be convenient for them. Well, the merch site is actually not my own site. It's administered by a company called Fourth Wall that does merchandising for YouTube creators. And basically what they do is they have a platform that I can use to design lots of different types of merch. And I go up there, I design the stuff I like, they send me samples, I look over the samples, sometimes make revisions, sometimes decide, I don't want to sell this, sometimes I really like it and, I want to have it for sale to the general public. And so once it's up for sale there, they're the ones that produce it and they distribute it and ship it out to you. So the payment actually goes to them and I receive a percentage of the sales as my own expenses. But I don't actually sell the merch directly. It's through this Fourth Wall company. Unlike my boas I sell directly. I handle 100% of the process. I do all of the marketing, all of the email communications and customer service. I do all of the packaging and shipping and tracking the shipments and making sure you're happy with the animals once you receive them. So it's actually a separate entity. Brian Boas is not the same as Fourth Wall, which distributes the merchandise. So you can't buy boas on the merch site. And so a related question was someone I was preparing a shipment to go out to them, and they asked me if I could put a couple t-shirts. They wanted to buy some shirts. I could put some shirts in the shipment so that they could save on shipping. For the same reason, I don't have the shirts here. Other than the samples and stuff that I decide to purchase for myself, I don't have an inventory of merch. Okay, it all comes from the Fourth Wall site. So when you order the stuff, it's going to be shipped to you directly from Fourth Wall. And Fourth Wall has distributors in multiple countries, so you don't have to be in the USA to order the merch, unlike the boas that I don't ship out of the USA. So if you're in Europe or Africa or Asia or wherever, feel free to order some merch and chances are pretty good that it can be shipped to you. But I value all your feedback, so whatever you want to tell me about the merch, if you're happy with your item, if you're not happy with your item, let me know just so that I can take that into account for future merch decisions. Okay, and thanks everybody again for all the really kind comments. My heart was warmed, as cheesy as it might sound, over all of the positive support you guys gave me. And that's really what keeps me making these videos, is all the love and support I get from you guys. So thank you so much. Okay, so next question on the list. Somebody was asking me about the role of boas in the environment, and specifically they wanted to know about the impact of collection for the pet trade and the reptile hobby on wild boas. Well, a video to describe the role of boas on the environment could be hours long, but I'll just say that they play a crucial niche in the ecosystem. Of course, they're predators, and they keep, rodents and small animals that might breed out of control. They keep them in check by preying on them, and in turn, they offer food sources for higher level predators, such as birds of prey and other reptiles and some mammals and things like that. So they play a crucial role in the ecosystem. And then the second part of the question is about the impact of the pet trade on boas in the wild. And you often hear negative things about the pet trade and, claims from certain groups that the pet trade is responsible for near extinction of animals in the wild and things like that. And there are cases where the pet trade did have an impact on wild populations. However, that's really the exception, and there are far more threats to reptiles and other animals in the wild that have absolutely nothing to do with the pet trade. Of course, they have a lot to do with human activity. And so I'll say first of all that with locality boas, a lot of them are descended just from a few animals that were collected at one point and brought into captivity. And we might be talking about as few as like 3 or 4 animals. It's kind of crazy to think things like tarahumara boas and some of the island boas, things like that. I think even with Argentine boas, there was a relatively small group of animals that was brought in back in the late 80s and early 90s before the export was closed by CITES. And so all of the Argentine boas in captivity in the US are descended from this original group of founder animals. So for most boas, I would say that the collection and the pet trade has virtually no impact on the overall population. There are some examples where it did. For example, with Hog Island boas. These Hog Island boas were living on 2 small islands as a relatively small population, and thousands of them were collected for the pet trade back from the 70s up till like the early 90s. So yes, that did have a big impact. Fortunately, the Honduran government stepped in and they made the islands a national park and they banned all collection. And fortunately, the population has really rebounded, and there are now a lot of boas on Hog Island, and hopefully that'll stay that way in the future. When we think about boas being exported from the wild, there's only a few types of boas that are still being collected and exported from the wild. The vast majority of countries that the boas live in do not allow any export, which is unfortunate for people that want to breed them because it's really hard to get unrelated bloodlines. As far as I know, you can still get wild-caught animals from some of the true red-tailed boa countries like Guyana, Suriname. You still regularly see wild-caught animals, but really that's about it. And I know in the past a lot of animals were exported out of Colombia that really formed, the cornerstone of the pet trade, the Colombian boa, and some other localities as well. But unfortunately, now it's really hard to get anything that's wild caught and bring in new types of boas in captivity. And when we think about what really kills animals in the wild, the vast majority of them come from human activity and deforestation and destroying the natural habitat of these animals. When we think about a handful of animals that would be needed to found a new locality in captivity, say a dozen animals, probably more animals than this die just by cutting down a couple acres of forest where they live. And then when we think about the roads that cut through these habitats, we're talking probably about hundreds or thousands of them every day that are being killed on the road. When you look at like the entire Amazon rainforest, for example. So it's really kind of mind-boggling that just a few animals cannot be exported when we think about the death of so many other animals from other human-related activities. And if they did export them in captivity, it represents a reserve of genetics and a reserve of animals breeding in captivity that will preserve the species. Even if they're not ultimately going back to the wild, it's a lot better to have them in captivity than not to have them anywhere at all. You'll also say fires. You hear about all these fires happening in forests, and unfortunately fires are do happen naturally, but a lot of them are also related to human activity. And if you're talking about burning, let's say 100 acres of forest, you're probably killing thousands and thousands of reptiles as well as countless other animals. So it's really kind of trivial thinking about the impact of taking a dozen animals from the wild for the pet trade compared to all the other negative human activities. Okay, so that was kind of a long answer. For the next question, I have a shorter answer. One of the viewers asked me if I would make videos on Indonesian tree boas and or Solomon Island ground boas. Unfortunately, I can't make videos on those species. Typically, I only make videos in detail on species that I keep. And as you may know, I only keep animals in the boa constrictor group, which I define as boa constrictor, boa imperator, and boa sigma. So I don't make videos about rainbow boas or anacondas or rubber boas or Solomon Island ground boas. I may mention them in other summary videos, like I used to make videos about different types of snakes in general. But as far as the detailed care information, I've never worked with these species, so I really can't comment on them. I really want my videos to have some kind of authority, and I'm not just going to make a video on something that I don't know about, because I want you guys to have accurate information that's based on actual experience. Okay, next question. How do you recommend removing stuck eye caps? So some of you may have encountered issues with shedding, and one of the parts of the skin that often will get retained if you have shedding issues are the eye caps. And you have to be extremely careful when you're trying to remove the eye cap. So the first thing, if you're having any kind of shedding issue, you want to raise your humidity and you want to soak your animal. And hopefully, just by doing that, when you soak, the skin will kind of come off, and hopefully you don't even really have to pull it off, it just kind of falls off. And then when you increase the humidity, hopefully the next shed cycle you shouldn't have an issue. So if you notice that there are shed eye caps, it is possible to gently remove them, either with tweezers or just manually remove them. But please, please, please be extremely careful when you do this, okay? And if you're in doubt, don't do it, because I've heard examples where people try to do this. They put the tweezer and they gently grab the eye cap and pull, and they end up pulling out the animal's whole eyeball. And the animal is now blind for life and disfigured. So please, please do not take this lightly. Do not remove an eye cap unless you're absolutely sure you're not going to damage the snake. So it's far better just to wait to the next shed cycle. So just increase the humidity, maybe soak your snake every week or something to keep the skin nice and moist. And then hopefully the next shed cycle, the skin will shed in one piece and you'll remove that shed eye cap. Next question, and this is really more of a comment / request. The viewer requested that I please start working with more Guyana red-tailed boas. And so, as you know, Suriname red-tailed boas like this one are basically my bread and butter, the species that I have the most of and that I produce the most of, and that hopefully every year I should produce really nice examples. This is an animal from 2022 that I'm holding back. And up until recently, I did have a pair of Guyana boas. They were from Mike Eckert's bloodline. And the reason I picked them up was because they look completely different from my Suriname boas. The majority of Guyana boas are completely indistinguishable from Suriname boas. They're one and the same. They're not just the same species and subspecies, boa constrictor, but they're from a contiguous population, meaning that there's gene flow in the wild, and there's no barrier that prevents a boa from Guyana from crossing the river to go and breed with a boa from Suriname. They're basically one and the same. That being said, there are bloodlines of both Suriname and Guyana boa that are associated with a specific look, and a lot of people breed for the specific look, and it might be somewhat based on what occurs in the wild, but it's really more of a captive phenomenon. So I had this nice pair of these dark Guyana boas. I actually have rehomed them. I have a friend of mine took them, and he's working with them now. Hopefully he'll have some babies later this year, fingers crossed. But I just decided to get out of them and to focus more on the Suriname boas. But I'll say that it's kind of stupid that people are perpetuating this myth that a Guyana boa is different from a Suriname boa, because they're one and the same. And ultimately we have small gene pools of animals in captivity, and when we make these arbitrary decisions about what this is and what it isn't, we limit the animals that we can cross with each other. Of course, we want to keep things pure, so we of course would never want to breed a boa from Suriname with one from Peru, or God forbid a boa constrictor with a boa imperator. But with Suriname and Guyana, it's really basically the same thing, so we don't have to pretend that there's any difference anymore. Next, I got a lot of questions after I released a video on my breeding progress, and I showed some animals that I was hoping to be producing. I didn't show everything that I hoped to be producing, and a lot of people asked me to clarify. So one question, will you be producing any pastels this year? And the answer is yes, I'm hoping to produce some Coops pastel Colombian boas, and fingers crossed the female's gravid right now. I know there's something inside of her because she's huge. I don't know if it's slugs or if it's viable babies. So unfortunately there's no guarantees, and until I have those viable babies on the ground, hopefully in a few months, I can't say for sure that I'll have these pastel boas. But I really like the Coops pastel, so I'm really hoping that this is going to be successful. And then a lot of people asked me if I'd be producing any Honduran firebellies. The answer is yes, I hope to, but the same caveats. I don't know for sure if I am, and how the babies are going to be, so I can't guarantee anything at this point. If you're interested in any type of specific boa that you think I might be working with, feel free to shoot me a line and I can tell you a little more detailed information. But again, until animals are on the ground and born and ready to go, I can't guarantee anything. And typically they're not ready to go as far as new homes until about a month and a half to 2 months after they're born. So I haven't had any litters yet this year, but should hopefully be having them in the next month or so. And then baby boas will start to be available over the summer. So please stay tuned. So one last question for today's video. Somebody asked me to please explain the IMG boa, and is this boa derived from other locales like the Argentine or the long-tail boa? And so the IMG boa, which is one of my favorite morphs, is the increasing melanin gene boa. And this is an example. This is a year-old IMG that was born here last spring, doing great and getting bigger, and you can see her color. So this animal wasn't nearly this dark when she was born, and with every shed she's put on some more of the black speckling, and in another year or two she'll start to get more and more black, and I'm expecting this animal will be almost pure black when she's an adult. So her mother is a hypo IMG, and even though the hypo does tone down the dark color a little bit, her mother is still really dark. So this one is not a hypo, so I'm expecting this one to be even darker. And just a really beautiful animal. This actually, she was for sale for a while, and she just really grew on me, and I decided to keep her, which I'm glad that no one scooped her up on me, because I just love this boa. And just how dark she's getting, it's just amazing, the transformation. So they put on this melanin with every shed, and they don't reach their full darkness until they're 3 or 4 years old. But the IMG gene was established by the renowned boa breeder Peter Call, who also established the Call albino. And the story was that he was at a reptile show and saw a litter of boas someone had that didn't really know much about them, and saw this little baby dark melanistic boa in the litter and acquired it. And then he bred it, and he showed that it was genetic, and it's actually a dominant trait. And he established the IMG gene back around early 2000s, 2007 I think. But it's just a great morph to be in, and it's really impressive looking, and I can't recommend it enough. Incidentally, the person asked also about whether it's derived from the long-tail boa or the Argentine boa, which are naturally occurring dark boas. The long-tail boa, longicauda, is kind of like a naturally occurring IMG, where the animals do get darker over time, and they get really dark by the time they're adult. But it's actually different from what's going on in these IMG morph boas. As far as the locality of these animals, they don't have a definite locality. but odds are that they're largely Colombian, because they're basically morph boas. So they might have a little bit of other stuff thrown in there, but it's likely that they're largely, if not entirely, Colombian in origin. And the fact that Peter Call saw this animal and was able to recognize it and had the vision to breed it and establish this morph is what makes breeders great. When they can see something and they can think about what the next generation is going to be and really make it happen. Another similar example was the VPI albino, where Tracy Barker was at a pet store and saw this litter of baby boas, and some of them had this really nice caramel look to them. And they decided, the Barkers acquired the whole litter and they bred it, and they showed that it was a recessive trait, and they established the VPI T positive albino. And IMG and VPI T positive are like two of the top boa morphs, in my opinion, if not the top boa morphs ever produced. So it's great that these breeders had the vision to do this. Otherwise, these animals may well have ended up as someone's pet and not having bred, and then that gene would not have gone into her herpetoculture. So always be on the lookout for something that's maybe a little bit different and that maybe can establish the next morph. So anyway, that was a few questions. Thanks for all you guys who've been asking the questions. Keep them coming for future videos, and enjoy your boas.